reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Then Jesus was approached by the some of the Sadducees, priestly leaders who say there is no resurrection from the dead. They posed this question: Rabbi, Moses gave us a law that if a man dies, leaving a wife but no children, his brother should marry the widow and have a child who will carry on the brother's name. Well, suppose there were 7 brothers. The oldest one married and then died without children. So the second brother married the widow, but he also died. Then the third brother married her. This continued with all 7 of them, who died without children. Finally, the woman also died. So tell us, whose wife will she be in the resurrection? For all 7 were married to her. Jesus replied, marriage is for people here on this earth, but in the age to come, those worthy of being raised from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage, and they will never die again. In this respect, they will be like angels. They are children of God and children of the resurrection. But now, as to whether the dead will be raised, even Moses proved this when he wrote about the burning bush. Long after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had died, he referred to the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So he is the God of the living, not the dead, for they are all alive to him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You may be seated. It's so good to be back home. I did get homesick after the first couple of days, and then I realized I was going to be gone for an entire month. But I come here today so excited to see you once again and to bring you greetings from our brothers and sisters in Poland, in Austria, in Belgium, and the Netherlands. The ECC churches that are over there, since I've been there 2 years ago, have doubled in size. And they also have different missions in different parts of their countries in which they're found. So the ECC is growing in Europe, and it's really interesting to see this unexpected development in terms of what we started here at St. Matthew's has now become a global phenomenon. We are still small, we're very small and hardly noticeable, but seeds are being planted in our generation, not only across this country, the United States, but now in Europe, and eventually we will be in the Philippines and in South America and Africa. So the world is quickly changing, and we are a part of what God is doing. God is doing a new thing in our time and in our age and our generation, and it's marvelous to behold. And so all our brothers and sisters in Europe that I visited wanted me to be sure to greet you because they look upon this community with a great deal of awe. And that's hard to believe, huh? Our little storefront church is held in such high esteem by people in the different parts of the world. The ECC in Europe is primarily a movement among young people under the age of 30. And it's so inspiring for me to see these young people have such a deep commitment to their faith and have a heart that is searching for God, and they're looking into the ancient way in which Christianity was when it first came to Europe, and at the same time they're looking for some church that is able to respond to the needs of the dawn of the third millennium. And so they have invited us to come over there. They want to be like us. They see something in the people of St. Matthew's and the ECC in the United States that they wish to imitate and wish to follow. And to see these young people so filled with faith and so much joy and utter and complete commitment to what they're doing is something that is a great inspiration for me. In Poland, I visited the Polish community in Poznan. The priest is 27 years old. He was 25 when I visited him the first time, so he's young. And so are all the members of the community, but they did have one couple there that was my age. And I said, I'm so glad you're truly becoming an inclusive church and you're allowing old people like me into your midst. And it was an older couple who wanted to get remarried. They were divorced in their life and they couldn't get married in the established churches in Poland. And so they found an EC church and this young priest, Father Tomas, and they asked him to do his wedding, and now they've become dedicated members of their community. And a week after I left, they had their marriage celebrated there. So a lot of good things are happening over there. You're probably noticing I'm wearing a different outfit today. And this was a gift to me when I was in Poland. And it seems like a lot for me to wear, but this is very significant. It is a conical. It is the oldest type of chasuble there was that was used in the ancient Christian church. It changed. It changed 1,000 years ago because the church split into the eastern half, which became the Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodoxy, and the western half, which was the Latin Church or the Roman Catholic Church, that then later split up into all the various Protestant denominations. But when the church had that great split, it was in the year 1054, they call it the Great Schism, something changed in both churches since they were no longer together. And one of the changes is they changed the way the priests looked. The Eastern Church took on a more Byzantine style, and they had a distinctive look. If you go to an Orthodox church, you will recognize that their vestments are very different than what you might have experienced in the Roman Catholic Church. And then in the Western Church, they also changed the way they look. So there would be no confusion of what church you were in. You could tell by the wardrobe the priest wore. But before the Great Schism, what I'm wearing here was worn by everybody who was a priest celebrating the Eucharist on Sunday morning, whether you were from the east or the west. And it's a cone shape, just a cone, like a circle over me, and then I do this kind of thing. So this is, I'm explaining this design because Father Tomas, based upon the iconography that was available to him, designed this according to the specifications he knew and had them made. And then these were presented to me as a gift. Well, to the community of St. Matthew's. Even though I'm wearing it, it does belong to you. Chasuble means dwelling or house. That's what it means. And the garment that is put over the priest before he celebrates the liturgy of the Eucharist. It has a symbolic value. You see, it has everything to do with this idea and this belief that Christians have in the resurrection. When we die, according to Christian thinking, the thinking of the New Testament, that invisible part of ourselves, the depths of our very being, the human spirit, is immediately in the presence of Christ. So to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. This is what St. Paul tells us. But that is not what eternal life is. This is really a Greek idea that the afterlife is that we are disembodied souls somehow floating around in a place called heaven taking harp lessons. We think of the afterlife as somewhere else. But that's not the biblical understanding of the afterlife. The biblical understanding is the resurrection. There will be a point in time when this age that we know, this world, this reality that we live in, that we think is so much more real than anything else, will fade away. And it will be replaced by a new age, a new reality. In fact, that new reality has already broken into history in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. And with his resurrection from the dead, this new reality has been let loose in the world. But it is invisible. It is something that we experience within the human heart because the redemption of the universe is beginning within the human heart and working its way out so that the redemptive work of God will not end until all of the universe is completely transformed from corruption to incorruption, from mortality to immortality. And our eternal destiny is that we will not be left naked, St. Paul says, as disembodied spirits, but we will be given a new dwelling, a new body like that of the resurrected Christ, not subject to the laws of nature as we understand them, but a completely different reality. It is divinized humanity. It is spiritualized matter. It is no longer this dualistic understanding of separation where you have heaven and earth and the spiritual world and the material world. There will be a synthesis of the two and a transformation that will take place. And reality as we know it will be utterly and completely transformed. So we will live in a physical body, but unlike the bodies that we're in now, it will be perfect and incorruptible. And so as you think about your own body with all of its flaws and limitations, take heart. It will be replaced by a new and indestructible, immortal body like that of the resurrected Christ, transformed from glory unto glory. We can't even imagine. Eye has not seen, ear has not heard what God has in store for his people. What we await is a great destiny, but we know not what it is. But this we do know, when he appears, we will be transformed. We will be like him, and we will know him as he is. And we will see him with our own eyes in this body, as Job gives in this poetic passage in the first reading, which began, I know that my Redeemer lives. And on the last day, I shall see him standing upon the earth. With my own eyes in my own body will I behold this. This idea of resurrection is something that's hard for us to conceive of because it's about transformation of something that we know into something that is unknown to us. And that's why it's so difficult to try to imagine what this new reality is that is bursting upon it. But we are invited to participate in it. And the sign that we are already participating in this new reality is the transformation that takes place within our hearts. Hearts filled with faith, hope, and love is the evidence that the new world is coming. It is arriving within me first, but it will extend to all creation and to every creature. That is the vision of the New Testament. That is what we mean by resurrection and why it is so essential to us. The resurrection is at the very heart of our faith, and Jesus is the first fruit of that great action of God to recreate and renew all of creation. There was a period of time, about 500 and 600 years before the time of Jesus, that was an important time in the history of humankind. It's often called the axial age. How many have heard of that, the axial age? It was a time in which humanity achieved a level of consciousness collectively throughout the world unlike anything that occurred before. It was as if the human race had achieved a level of maturity at this period of time. This is the time of the great ancient philosophers of Greece when they began to expound their ideas and their speculative there's speculative thoughts about the nature of reality. This is the time that Buddha started a renewal within the religion of India. This is the time that Confucius was teaching the way of wisdom in China. This was the time of the emergence of the ancient Hebrew prophets. And with the coming of the prophets, there came this idea that God will not leave us in the dust of death, but that God will raise the dead, because God is the God of the living, not of the dead. But in the time of Jesus, this was a disputed and controversial doctrine. This was an idea that was not accepted by the religious establishment of the institutional religion of that day. The Sadducees, which was the party of the high priest and the priesthood, had a different notion. They didn't believe that there was any life after death. That this was it. And if you want blessing in this life, you got to come to the temple and pay your tithe and make your offering. Then you will have a good life. It is limited to this. This was the message of institutional religion. But their opponents, the Pharisees, had another idea. They studied the words of the prophets and they believed in the resurrection and they looked forward to the resurrection. This was a great division that existed in Judaism of that time, the religion of Jesus. Jesus also spoke of the resurrection. But unlike the Pharisees, he spoke of it in very personal terms. For to Jesus, the event of the resurrection is not some inevitable thing that's going to happen with the unfolding of history at the end of the age. But Jesus said to his disciples, I am the resurrection and the life. You want to know what resurrection is? I am the resurrection and the life. And the one who believes in me, even though he dies, shall live forever. Do you believe this? This is what he said to his disciples. Stunning, isn't it? In the last moments, the weeks leading up to the death of Jesus, he was in the temple. He was at the height of his popularity. His approval ratings went through the roof. Unlike some governmental leaders today. He was favored by all the masses of the people. And he has taken over the city of Jerusalem with all his followers and taken over the temple. And he's there teaching. And the high priest can do nothing to stop him. And everybody who was an enemy of Jesus knew they had to get rid of him. Jesus was a problem. There was the Jesus problem. And the problem is simply this. We have a delicate balance of power, and Jesus is threatening to disrupt that, and the Romans are going to send in their armies and take away our country, and take away our privileged position. That was the position of the priests and the Sadducees. They had to get rid of Jesus, but how could they? Because he had the popularity. He was extremely popular among the masses. How would they be able to get rid of him? By discrediting him. By asking him trick questions, that he may somehow be discredited in the face of the crowds that were gathered there in Jerusalem, because they knew how fickle-minded the masses are. We see that in our own day, do we not? We are looking for the next celebrity. We're looking for the next hero politician. We're looking for that next one who's yet to come, who can capture our imagination and lead us into some sort of golden age. They knew how fickle the crowds were. So all they had to do is get Jesus to give the wrong answer that went against public sentiment, and he would lose all of his popularity in a moment. They understood these things well. And so they set a series of 3 trick questions. And I'm not going to tell you all 3, but one of the 3 is what we heard today. The Sadducees came, and they didn't believe in the resurrection. And so they posed this question to Jesus there for everyone to hear as the crowds were gathered. You could hear a pin drop in the temple precincts there on Solomon's plaza there outside the temple. And so they approached Jesus with this question. Suppose there was a man who had a wife, and before she had any children born unto him, he died. Now the law of Moses required that such a woman would have to be married to the next brother in line. And then that next brother in line would sire children in the name of the brother who died, so that way the family lineage would continue on. I want to tell you something, my brothers and sisters. Marriage was a different affair in the Bible than it is today. People want to return to the marriage rules of the Bible? Watch out! I only have one wife, and for good reason. I couldn't handle 5 more. So they said, so he marries the second. She marries the second brother. And he also dies before siring any children. And she goes through the succession of all 7 brothers. I don't know about you, but if I was the 7th brother, I would hesitate to marry such a woman. She was married to all 7, and they had no children, and then finally the woman dies. Now, whose wife will she be in the resurrection? Trick question. Whose wife would she be? Because it would be unlawful for her to have 7 husbands at the same time. And Jesus says to the Sadducees, "Oh, do you err? Oh, do you err, not knowing God, not knowing the Scriptures? There is no marriage or the giving in marriage in heaven. In the resurrection, we have an entirely different kind of existence. Oh, do you err? And you think that there's no life after death? Well, listen to Moses, whom you revere. Moses said that God appeared to him and identified himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He didn't say, I was the God of Abraham. I was the God of Jacob. I was the God of Isaac. He said, I am the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. All are alive to God. The Sadducees thought they had the trick question of the day, and they failed in their endeavor. Interestingly enough, the Pharisees were there, who believed in the resurrection, and they were posed that question many times by the Sadducees. You know, people like to argue theology and beliefs. And they've had that argument before. And the Pharisees were scratching their heads thinking, why didn't we think of that? And the crowds were cheering, and the Sadducees were shamed because Jesus outsmarted them again. I believe in the resurrection, my brothers and sisters. We are all looking forward to that. Now I get you back to this new garment that I'm wearing here today, which is actually something very ancient and old. Do you know why the priests wore this? Because it was a symbol of the resurrection body that would come. We would not be naked, as St. Paul says. Right now, we're in an earthly tabernacle that is subject to corruption. And as I get older, the more corrupt my body becomes. But I see death at work in my body, but there is life in my heart, the life of the Son of God. And I will not be left naked. I will be given a new body. This chasuble, this garment that the priests wear is a representation to the entire community that we will be clothed with a new and indestructible, immortal body in the day of the resurrection. This is what this means. I believe in the resurrection, my brothers and sisters. It is at the very heart of our faith. Right now, this world is beginning to fade. It has been fading for a long time. But the day will come when this life as we know it will fade like some forgotten dream. But there is a new reality that we look forward to. A reality in which our mortality will be swallowed up by immortality. A place where there is no longer any disease or death. A place where we will be living in perfect harmony with the creative will and the desire of our Creator. Where we will be living as persons close to one another in koinonia and fellowship and relating to the divine persons of the Blessed Trinity. We can't even comprehend this reality. It is beyond us to even imagine. But if we take the Scriptures and the testimony of the disciples and the words of Jesus, we will know this is the reality that we are looking forward to embracing. And it is a new world that is coming. And we have this reality even now in our midst within our hearts. Because as we draw closer to the immortal God within our hearts, to the person of Jesus, we are drawn closer to one another. And as we are drawn closer to one another, we are being drawn closer and closer to the culmination of this age and the birth of a new age that is yet to come. This is our faith. This is what we celebrate. And the table and the Mass, the Eucharist, is a foreshadowing of that great feast in the next world when we will all be together. And we will be celebrating the joy of life and realizing what it truly means to be human and to experience the redemptive plan of our Creator. I believe in the resurrection. This is what we celebrate as we now take the life of Jesus from this altar and bring it into our own hearts and lives, that we might take the life of Jesus out into the world, to the place where I work, to the place where I shop, to my family and to my friends. This is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. This is what it means to be worshiping the God of the living. Amen. Amen. Let us stand together and profess our faith.